Greetings, fencers. So this is a review of the VB Light Feather, along with a little bit of my thoughts on light swords, because that's sort of a topic at the moment. So we've had these for about 8 or 9 months now, and so 2 of these in the club, and we've had a great time with them. So first thing, here's the specs. I'm assuming the weight is incorrect, just because that's the same weight as all the VB feathers, and this is the light one. So most feathers are around that 1,400 to 1,600 grams. This one's probably somewhere in the 1,300 grams, but I don't really have something that can weigh stuff this light. And so starting at the tip, it has a tip that is very rounded, a spatulated tip. I'm not a huge fan of the tip, just because it's so rounded, especially when you hit with the end, there's not a lot of steel that's actually touching. Now it's equal, whether you thrust here, here, or here, but compared to most regular feathers, you have a very large surface area for the very end, which is, how you're usually thrusting. It does mean that if you hit on the edge with what was likely going to be a cut, you have less impact. So personally, I would probably prefer that be a little bit flatter, even if it's not completely flat. So you can see it gets quite thin going down the blade, staying within that 2 millimeter threshold, but both the profile and the distal get really thin, and that thickens out. And what this allows it, that it bends quite a lot at the tip, as well as impact is very, very light. I can start really swinging it, and I can still take that impact to my hands. The blade length is, just about an inch shorter than most standard feathers, so sort of like a shorty length, but a standard length handle. It is a construction with a nut at the end. One of the swords had a little bit of a problem. We had to Loctite it because it wouldn't actually tighten. This one's been okay, but that does mean you can replace the blade, and so you can buy just spares of their regular feathers or another light one and stick it into the same handle and everything. And so the overall flex with this, although it flexes very effortlessly at the tip, the overall flex to get the full deviation is probably a little bit stiffer than a Siggy. So it's not like overly whippy. It isn't a sword that wobbles a bunch. It kind of feels reasonably stiff in the hand. So it is good on the thrust. You really don't have to worry about it too much, but it's not an overly flexible sword. It's not a crazy light thrust. Now, getting to use this, it was almost immediately noticeable, where essentially within the first couple minutes of it in my hand, sparring, I could send cuts in way harder than I had in a long time. So I fence quite lightly. Running a club, I need to make sure that I'm being the example, I'm not hurting anyone. I haven't fenced like this in a long time, just sending my thwarts as hard as I can. With this actually gave me the freedom where I could actually send my thwart as hard as I can, especially that crossed arm thwart. You just feint a thrust and you just send that thwart in. I could do that essentially full speed without any pullback, and people still said the impact was fine. Thrust, you really don't have to care much. You just send that thrust in. And so what this sword ends up doing is you don't have to be thinking as much about your partner's safety. The sword's doing it for you. So that's the little bit of a benefit. And you can switch back and forth. It's not like this will take over. When I go back to just, a standard Dragonair or something, you're thinking of your partner's safety. You're going fast without going too fast or too hard. But that's been really nice because, for the first time in years, I'm able to just kind of not care and just send my sword out. Now, being quite a light feather like this, it is a training tool, and it's going to have a shorter lifespan. So, as you can see, there is a bit of a deviation in the blade. I think I can bend it to make it more visible to where it is bent. So it did get a set in the sword. The major one happened here, where it was into someone's body. They stepped into my thrust and the sword stayed bent, and this is the type of flex that is staying with it likely for its whole life. Anytime it bends that way, it bends easier. Now it does say on the warranty for this that you void the warranty if you use it against other types of feathers, if you don't use it against light feathers. I don't really know why that's the case. We've used this against every feather that we have, and there has been no issue. There's been like no problems. It's just kind of in our bag with all our swords. It gets grabbed and used with all of them, and there's not really an issue with that. What can affect the lifetime of the sword is a person's body and just sparring. So one of the things with just light feathers in general, but also great with this sword, is we've gotten to see a trend in HEMA. A lot of people have sort of come to the conclusion or realization that, you know, lighter swords are important. Okay, if I'm able to give this to a student and they're able to do 100 reps of something perfectly, that's more important than weightlifting and using a heavy sword and doing like 20 reps of something and then being tired for another 10 reps, and then the next 10 reps after that just kind of look really sluggish and really bad, and then we have to take a break and go through, oh, this is the technique we're doing, you're not doing what you're trying to do. And it's like that all gets fixed by using a light sword and actually focusing on your technique and what you're exactly trying to do. And that's a huge importance. It gets people who don't have the upper body strength to just use feathers, allows them to start training with a steel sword earlier, because that's why a lot of people want to do HEMA if they're coming from Eskrima or SCA or Belgarth. They want to be able to use steel swords. That's what HEMA can offer other groups. And so it's also great for me or any coach or just other training partners when doing drills over and over again, in that the thrust and the cut have significantly less impact, and so you're able to go full speed in all of your reps and not have to slow it down each time or adjust your structure to have it hit not as hard. As well as in sparring, it's great having a light sword. I've had students who, we often have quite quick exchanges where there's only going to be like one back and forth. Now when they send that sword out, instead of getting stuck with their sword down low, they can actually pull their sword back up to parry and try and get a riposte. Okay, and so they can actually move this sword multiple times, and we can have longer exchanges back and forth as we're fencing, which has been great for getting prolonged exchanges, more techniques, and more confidence in trying new techniques, because they're thinking about, oh, maybe I'll go for a crossed-armed undercut, which a lot of people flat out don't do that, because if you feel you're going to be too slow and the person's going to cut you when you're here, that can be solved with technique and making sure you're doing stuff at the right distance. But this gives people the confidence to start putting it into sparring at an earlier time, because that's when you get most of your feedback, is once you're sparring. You know what's working, what's not working. So huge importance getting light feathers in the club. It's been absolutely fantastic. I found myself really just using this sword only for a while after I got it, and was just having so much fun using it. I have gone back to using my other feathers a little bit more often now to also prolong the longevity of this one, but definitely highly recommend the VB light sword, and it's a great feather for that little niche element. That's an important part of your training. It's not all of your training, but it's an important part. And so if you run a club, definitely this is a great sword to hand your students. You know that they're not going to be hitting you as hard, and you're going to be getting them to do lots of reps at a very good structured position each time, because they're not getting exhausted after just a few reps. Thanks for watching. Keep studying, keep practicing.